Welcome, everyone. This is my lovely interview with Claire Latané, and we're going to be talking today about design with mental health in mind. And I think a lot of people in this audience are going to understand that, you know, children learn better, they grow better in nurturing environments. And it means that I'm very excited to be talking to you today because you have, spent your career now thinking about the ways that this is true and the way to enhance the nurturing features of a child's environment. And before we get in, my name is Lindsay Keller-Madsen. I will be hosting this discussion, and I'm the author of a new children's book called Meet the Wild, and I've been interviewing a series of experts to try and understand the importance of natural environments and the role that the outdoors can play for children really early in their lives, but also, as they grow and develop and get into the educational systems. And as a mom, personally, this topic is also very important to me. I have 4 young children who are just getting started in their journeys, and I'm just really excited to hear more about Claire's work. She is a writer and ecological designer. She's also an assistant professor in landscape architecture in California. And Claire, you also run your own consultancy now called Design with Mental Health in Mind. So did I miss anything in the introduction?
Those are the primary things. Thank you.
No problem. So I would love to just dive into the questions if you're ready.
Sure.
Okay. So early in your book, also called Schools That Heal, Design with Mental Health in Mind, there's a quote in the foreword that I really loved, and I'm going to read it and then ask you to sort of unpack what you feel this means. The current dominant practices in school design harm our children mentally and physically. It kind of stopped me in the reading. I'd love to know what you think this means about the way schools are designed today and how they are causing issues.
Sure. So I was really fortunate to have that foreword written by Manal Abuelada, who is an expert in public health. She works at the Prevention Institute here in Los Angeles and is very much focused on addressing mental health upstream instead of how we typically think of treating mental health issues, which is individually, person by person, after they have developed issues or disorders. And so that sentence to me means that, if you think about a typical school, and it might be different for those around the world, they are often incredibly institutional. They are often cold in character. So a lot of hard materials that can be easily cleaned, a lot of bare spaces where people can surveil children and see them across the whole campus instead of what we know to be healing, which are warm, natural materials like woods and fabrics, and lots of access to being surrounded by, or at least viewing, trees and gardens and nature. And what we do know about designed environments is that if they're not actively and intentionally designed to heal, they are harmful. They're really I love Susan Williams Goldhagen's quote, environments are not neutral. They are either healing or harmful. So we have to understand that as designers and educators, that we need to be intentional about creating places that heal.
Yeah. Oh, I really love that. I'm thinking again, my brain automatically thinks about, the way that we create spaces at home. I mean, it's very much in the flavor of nurturing, and I really love the idea that that might extend to the environments that my kids spend and they're all their time in every day in, and also, everyone expects children to learn within. Um, I also wanted to shift a little, if you could tell me more about how school design and landscape architecture can impact mental health. And I think you started to talk about this, from the beginning when children enter these institutions. could you tell me a little bit more about this opportunity we have to talk about that, for that experience for them?
Sure. In the research I've done and the work I've done collaboratively with other researchers, I've found three primary themes around that can be used to describe schools that heal. One is to design spaces that create a sense of belonging. The second is to provide places full of nature. And the third is to design places that inspire awe or wonder or curiosity or joy. So if you think about the kinds of spaces that create a sense of belonging, that could entail a number of things. I think one of the most important concepts that I talk about in Schools That Heal is the fact that students and teachers are not often involved in the design process, in designing their schools or their learning environments. And so including them in the design process is a really important and pretty easy way, although inclusive design, participatory design is an art. So it's good to have someone who knows how to do that well, or at least people who are good listeners on your team. But involving teachers and students in the design process will allow us to hear what they think about the school environment or the learning environment, what they need in the learning environment. And really, it's important to understand that even very small children know what they need. And we sort of, as we get older, often forget because we've been pigeonholed into or shoehorned into these environments that are not that healthy. Environments that create a sense of belonging also reflect the communities that they serve. So again, including students and teachers and community members, very vital, but also including experts in developmental stages and special education, physical therapy, occupational therapy. All of these experts can help us understand how a design or an environment can create opportunities for physical activity, for strength building, for creative play, and things like that. And then educators who are well practiced in outdoor teaching. Teaching outside it's a special skill that not everyone has. And often teachers who aren't used to teaching outside, they need a little help and guidance in becoming comfortable at that, because it's a new environment to surround yourself in. The nature-filled places is a little more straightforward, but there are opportunities even in schools with no windows, which we have too many of, in the United States, probably elsewhere too. Schools that don't have a single square inch of soil on them. You could do things to bring in nature, even if it's painted on the wall, or natural materials, creating a mobile to hang in a classroom around an event so that it can move and create visual interest, or bringing in birds or fish or pets into the classroom or into the campus. Those can create some soft fascinations, things for students to really pay attention to and take care of, which is healing. And then the idea of awe or joy, I think it's really important that we remember that learning can only be fun if there are those moments, if there are those opportunities for a student, no matter how old they are, to lose themselves. to lose themselves in the environment and the landscape. Or, you know, if you think about the things that bring us joy and awe are usually revolve nature or the natural world, but it can also be art, music. Um, Sometimes it can be athletic events if we're together in person. Um, yeah, it could be a lot of things, but we really have to put ourselves in that, in the framework or the mindset to think about how to create opportunities for joy and awe.
Yeah, all of these things really make me think about, in other conversations I've had about sensory integration, and that if you want to create the environment that stimulates children in a way that they'll stay engaged and also will hold their focus or interest, especially at the younger ages. But I would argue that this continues, then you need to create these environments that offer those stimuli. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, creating the balanced and engaging stimuli, and the right conditions for learning.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, you know, students that are experiencing trauma, which so many of our young people are today, I would say that it would be hard to find a young
Mhm.
person today at this time who hasn't experienced a traumatic event or experiencing extreme stress or anxiety. Um, they tend to be more sensitive to noise and visual chaos. So on the one hand, yes, we need to provide sensory experiences, fragrant gardens, for instance, things, soft things to touch. And on the other hand, we need to really pay attention to the distraction and harm that noise can cause, especially noise from machines or air conditioning and heating systems or roadways nearby or construction noise. All of those things can be really distracting. And it's, you know, I find that even in my classroom at Cal Poly Pomona, we have some pretty old air conditioning equipment. And when it comes on, it creates this clanging noise, and the entire class is disrupted because all of us sort of are jumping in our seats. Understanding that students that are experiencing higher levels of trauma or stress or anxiety are even more sensitive to that is really important. And at the high school age or the upper grades, teenagers are particularly impacted by stress. And understanding that is important to creating environments at all grades that really help students reduce stress. The teenage years are often the years that we forget to focus on in terms of learning environments, or there's so much attention to, at least in our country, at the younger ages, to get kids into nature or to have creative play opportunities. And teenagers are still developing, their brains are developing, and their brains are actually wired to feel heightened anxiety and stress when they get stressed out, unlike ours, which are wired to produce chemicals to calm us down. So if we can really understand and absorb that and have empathy for teenagers who are often, you know, made fun of, or their stress levels are made light of, they have um, really unique body chemistries and brain chemistries that make stress so much harder on them. Then we can start putting ourselves in their shoes and design environments that are really nurturing and quiet and calming on the one hand, and on the other hand, give choices of places to, you know, be very active and have lots of choices in where you can go.
Yeah, I heard another. I was listening to some of your interviews before this, and one, on the face of it, seems really simple, but this concept of having enough seating or having some different areas or for social interaction, It seems like a very obvious and simple thing, or shade cover, I think you've also talked about, and how these, yeah, I guess, could you talk a little bit about what these structures help achieve for students?
Sure. I mean, it does seem like it would be obvious that if you have 400 students eating lunch at the same time, you should probably provide 400 chairs or seats for those students. But I've been surprised over and over again how many schools um, don't have enough seating. And we have a local high school here with where every single student in the high school, I think there are now 1,100 students, maybe more, has lunch at the same time. They have 30 minutes to go through a lunch line, find a seat, and sit down and eat. So when you walk through campus at lunch, the majority of students are standing up. They're not eating. They skip lunch. They don't have anywhere to sit. And they're all huddled in these circles around a table with an umbrella, trying to find a corner of shade, or the few trees that are on campus, trying to find a corner of shade, because in Southern California, most of our students spend lunch outside. Um, they do have a cafeteria room, but it's very small. And in the case of that school, they prioritize students that are in the special education program to be in the cafeteria. So everyone else has to sort of fend for themselves outside. And that does a few things. It's not healthy for students to skip lunch. If they're eating in a rush, that's problematic. If they're having a scarcity of seating creates competition and hierarchy, which can lead to bullying and people feeling left out. It's just a number of issues that arise if you don't have enough seating or enough shade or enough comfortable places to be in. And then the other thing is that, students, like adults, experience all levels of social anxiety or moods. Sometimes I want to hang out with a group of friends. Sometimes I very much need to be alone. And remembering that students have very little autonomy in their school lives. They have to be there. Might help us realize the importance of creating little small spaces where a student can feel comfortable and safe being alone and is allowed to be alone, especially for those students who really need to get out of a social situation. Areas for small groups of students, areas for large groups of students, and really being thoughtful about that in our campus design, inside and outside, is important. That students need rooms to go into inside a building, or little corners where they can go and be away. This sense of being away is really important for our mental health.
In your book, you mentioned, you specifically have 10 inspiring examples, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit, the other side of this conversation is who's doing it really well, or who have thought about great spaces. So do you have any favorites, and would you tell us some of your, yeah, how they're designed in a way that works and serves kids well?
Yeah, the 10 that I include as case studies are, I tried to find a variety, because some school districts, or a school is up scheduled for a renovation and there's an opportunity to do a big change. Most schools are underfunded and probably can't do a big change or a big transformation, or not an immediate one anyway, or a quick one. So I found a number of schools that show a variety of approaches, from free or low cost to big transformations. And one that stands out is Ascend School in Oakland, which it's a charter school, which was formed in order to provide a real student-centered and family-centered education, and really focus on building relationships with the parents. which, is surprisingly uncommon in our school systems here. And the school building was, I think it was built in the 80s. It was a little bit of a hard environment. There wasn't much landscape around it. It was very tucked into this pretty urban area in Oakland, almost tucked under a rapid transit train line, that elevated bridge. And the vice principal and staff partnered with the Stanford Design School to work with the students and reimagine what their school could look like, how they could make small changes to help it feel safe and help provide a sense of belonging. And one of the things they had already done in the school was create this lobby space that looked like and felt like a family living room, with couches and a carpet and chairs and a bookshelf behind with a variety of books and student art hanging on the walls and little string lights above where you could hung from the railings on this second floor hallway that looked down onto it. And it was just the sort of the ideal of what we're going for, this homey, warm, welcoming space where parents can come and hang out and wait for their students, and where students can hang out in the middle of the day if they have a break or need a break. And some of the things the students identified in their exercises with the design school were small, cozy spaces under the stairwells, like taking advantage of those, making sure the bathrooms were clean and stocked with paper towels and cleaning supplies, like very basic things on the one hand. On the other hand, like a snack window, where could we pick up snacks during the day? Like, especially in middle school and high school, kids get hungry all the time. We need to make sure they're able to nourish themselves mentally, but also physically. And they looked at other ways around the outside of the school, but I was surprised how many creative ideas they came up with inside the school. And that's a really good example of how sometimes the most basic things, the most basic needs can be met with very small, quick interventions, like creating a living room-like space. Another school in Japan, an elementary school, a primary school, didn't have any outdoor space to create a new garden because of earthquakes and tsunamis. They had to leave most of their outdoor space for emergency setups because the school was the community area to come together in the case of a tsunami. And this school was in a neighborhood that had been a town that had been almost completely destroyed by the Fukushima nuclear disaster and tsunami that happened with this earthquake and the tsunami. But what was really interesting about that school on the coast of Japan was that they met with the community elders, and the elders identified that they hadn't done a great job preparing or educating their children's generation with understanding about the natural systems in their town, in their environment, and the ocean and the tsunamis. And they wanted to make sure that future generations, I'm looking for the school in the case study chapter, knew what to do, that after an earthquake stops rattling, that's the beginning. Like you really need to get busy and get to higher ground. And one of the things that they recalled were the tsunami stones that had been set in the mountains up at the levels where previous tsunamis had reached. And some of them were thousands of years old. So this was a way to remind and educate future generations of this is how high a tsunami reached. Make sure you're at least this high on the mountain. But the other thing that they did was they created a little wetland on the edge of campus where a spring was coming out of the bank. And the students take care of the wildlife in the wetland. There are fish in the wetland and plants and other animals, and the students take care of it. And they are connected through environmental education from the wetland to the nearby river to the ocean. And the idea is that their teachers very much want them to be understanding of the ocean and know about the ocean and learn about the ocean and spend time in the ocean, so they're not afraid of it, because their biggest memory of that ocean is that it harmed their community. Those are two schools that are more about programming and working with the students. Other schools in the book are, there is a high school in Virginia, Marshall High School in Fairfax County, Virginia, that was largely, it was they had a pretty large redevelopment project or school addition to allow more space for more students. And it was I want to say, I can't even remember how many millions of dollars, $60 million district wide school bond. That wasn't the actual school, that was the whole district. But they had a tragedy in the high school. One of their students had been killed in a shooting in the community, and it shook the high school to its core. And so the renovation was very much focused on how to support students' mental health and healing. Samaha Architects did a really lovely job of making sure that every opportunity was taken advantage of to create windows to the outdoors, even in stairwells, and the cafeteria and the band room, which if you're a bandy like me, we often are in those dark, completely closed off rooms with surrounded by acoustic materials. They have courtyards in each wing, in each classroom wing that are filled with trees and gardens. And the library is placed on the front of the school so that it can be a community resource as well as a school resource. And it was just a really beautiful example of how much you can do with windows and bringing the outdoors in.
I don't know if this is the same example, but I know you've talked before about using artwork also, like integrating that into indoor and outdoor spaces for healing. Both because I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it can be, a cultural link to the communities that live nearby, but also for storytelling. And please feel free to add on to this.
Yeah, I think, the creative act of making art can be healing and bring community together to create work that reflects their cultural heritage or who they are now. And art can be awe-inspiring. It can provide hope. It can be uplifting. It can do so many things, and it can brighten up a space. Like if all you have is hard surfaces in your school, you can do a lot to transform what that feels like with a few cans of paint. That can be a quick phase one. Paint on asphalt, or paint on, the beige buildings that dot all of our schools around here. Maybe there's a different color in other places, but here it's like this beigey yellow that's pretty bland, not that kid friendly or expressive.
Yeah, I know another thing you've talked before about also in the book is supporting trauma informed education is the quote I have. And I wondered if this was a time for where you could comment on how, our bodies respond to stress.
Yeah. One thing that, hasn't been a common knowledge for all that long is just how interconnected our bodies and minds are with our physical environment. And stress and trauma puts us on edge, and we're alert all the time, and our heart rates race, and it's really hard to hear or pay attention to people or to be calm. And so the idea of trauma-informed education is very student-centered. It allows students to work at their own pace on things that they're interested in. It reflects them in their learning. And trauma-informed design does the same thing. It's really putting the students' and teachers' needs above the needs of the facilities managers that are maintaining the site, for instance. And it prioritizes, strategies that calm us down. And this is why nature-filled spaces are so important, because the long decades worth of research shows us that looking out, like I have a view of a tree, and my son put a bird bath outside of my window during the pandemic so that I could put some water in it and watch birds, which is one of my favorite things to do. Looking outside at leaves blowing in the breeze or birds bouncing around in the shrubs. It's restful. It requires attention, but it's restful attention, and it reduces our stress and takes our minds off of what we're worried about. And more recent studies out of the University of Illinois have shown that providing those kinds of views to trees and nature from classroom windows helps students recover from stress quicker. It helps them do better on tests. It correlates with more students planning to go to college. And there are more and more being done on that every day. Probably the seminal study from 1984 was Roger Ulrich, who studied patients in hospital rooms with windows to a tree or a window to a brick wall or a window to a sky. And the patients in the rooms with windows to trees healed faster. They requested less pain medication, and they were released earlier than the other patients. So it's that very simple, putting a tree outside of a window is healing. And it's a simple move, but it's surprisingly not that common on our school grounds. And even if there are trees outside or woods outside, often teachers still have this idea, sadly, that students need to be looking at them in order to be learning. So you go into classrooms often and they're covered with, the blinds are closed, or there's cardboard up and they've blocked out any ability to, or there are security screens outside, which is really distracting outside the windows. And so I think simply making sure that teachers know that it's not up to them to make sure that students are looking at them at every moment. In fact, students are doing what their bodies are telling them they need when they daydream out the windows. I daydream out the window during meetings, and it doesn't mean I'm not paying attention. It actually just means I'm doing what I need to in order to be able to hear what's going on in the classroom.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think there's a lot that can be, simple adjustments that you're talking about to provide views to outdoor environments, even if kids have to be inside, that would make a big change. One thing I was hoping we'd get a chance to talk to, and I know we're coming to our last few minutes together, so is, how can we use design to be a vehicle to influence climate resilience and achieve environmental stewardship? I feel like, you've talked a lot about in your book about it being a big opportunity to nurture the kind of humans we're raising in our society.
Yeah, and also to, this generation, I would say even my generation, but especially the young people today they're worried, they're scared about climate change. They're seeing the changes every day and they're seeing this lack of action. And it freaks them out. So there are a few things, a few layers to that, designing schools that are full of trees to clean the air, to cool the block, reduce the heat island effect, reduce the need for air conditioning, reduce the risk of flood, provide habitat for creatures that pollinate our food producing plants and other plants as well. Provide food so that we don't have to ship food from far away. All of these things help mitigate climate change. And they also help educate students, show students that we're doing something, number one, to reduce their stress, but also educate students in what we can do to harvest rainwater, harness energy, use passive design to require less energy and to bring in natural ventilation and natural sunlight. When we start designing with passive systems and with nature and natural systems, it's like it's a feedback loop. So then you need less energy, and you don't need to mow. You don't need to prune. You don't need to use power equipment on the schools, which reduces noise, reduces the gasoline, and it just is, it like creates this positive feedback loop and lots and lots and lots of benefits. So it's almost inseparable when you start designing for climate resilience. If you're basing those designs on natural systems and working with nature, you're also helping improve mental health, and you're also educating children. And I mean, it has to be done thoughtfully. All of those things need to be intended, but they all support each other. And not only that, they support learning in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. But there are a lot of students don't learn well in a classroom. So providing nature-filled environments where teachers can take students outside to learn about life sciences and physical forces and write poems, learn about the history, natural history, the history of our communities and our geographies and all of the, cultural history. That can help students that are struggling in the classroom as well, which then again provides a positive feedback loop that will keep them in school longer and help them dream about going to college or university. So the possibilities are endless once you start making those connections. And one of my collaborators, Marcy Rainey, found that when you bring nature into school campuses, she's been studying elementary schools most recently, students are more physically active because they have more variety to choose from of what to do. Not all students like to kick a ball on a piece of asphalt, right? She found that they're more socially positive. Bullying goes down when you have more variety of natural spaces on a campus. And physical activity goes up, especially for fifth graders and especially for girls. And if we can keep kids physically active through fifth grade and older, they're more likely to remain active in adulthood, which supports mental health and well-being as well.
Oh, I feel that there are so many threads that kind of stem from these topics, and what I really appreciate about all the work that you've assembled in this book is how, I mean, I feel like I want to say that it's instinctual. I think maybe it's too soon for that, but it's certainly intentional, and it is very much about integrating with the environment in ways, yeah, intentionally. I think I want to and we're in the last few minutes, I know, before we have to leave, but I want to make sure you have the opportunity to tell people where they can learn more about your work. I think the book is available, and I'll be sure to include links to that. Um, But if folks want to get a hold of you or perhaps work with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, they can. So Cal Poly Pomona is where I'm teaching, and I'm the chair of the landscape architecture department right there right now. And we also have a new collaborative for healthy and inclusive learning environments at Cal Poly Pomona, which we're looking for new collaborations, and we're looking for new ways to share this work and to share other people's work who are doing things around this topic. So you should be able to find me there. I'd be happy for you to share my Cal Poly Pomona email on your website as well. I'll share that with you after we stop recording.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I will certainly include those details when I'm not sure if I'll do a write-up or if it'll just be an email, but I'll be sure to include that information for everybody. Thank you so much for
Wonderful.
your time. And yeah, I'll follow up if I get any questions afterwards.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was a joy to talk to you.